On a spring morning in 1845, two British Royal Navy ships, the HMS Terror and the HMS Erebus, depart England under the command of Sir John Franklin. Their quest, the elusive Northwest Passage.
At this time, for ships traveling from England in order to get to Asia, you have really just two options. You can either travel around the tip of South America and up into the Pacific Ocean, or you can travel down the tip of South Africa and then work your way up to the Indian Ocean.
They both take a really long time. It was speculated there had to be some sea route by which ships could travel up around Greenland and then across from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific.
The quest for a Northwest Passage is huge because it would cut travel time down considerably. What the British do is they send out continual expeditions.
From the west, they've come almost to the middle, and from the east, they've come almost to the middle. And it's that little middle, maybe 300 nautical miles, that's a blank on the map still. All the other routes were known, so if you could get through that middle part, you would get to the other side.
The big problem, of course, is it freezes every year. Shipping is going to come to a standstill, so there were only certain months of the year where it could be traveled.
By 1845, explorers have charted enough of the Canadian Arctic to make the Royal Navy confident that the Northwest Passage is finally within reach. To complete the final push, the British Admiralty selects 59-year-old Captain Sir John Franklin to lead the expedition. He isn't their first choice.
The British Admiralty had approached a number of known Arctic explorers. Sir William Parry, he was too old by that time, he declined. The Rosses were involved with other expeditions, so they actually considered delaying. But at the last moment, under pressure from Lady Jane Franklin, Sir John was chosen.
John Franklin, for one thing, was kind of old. He was 59 years old, which for a Royal Navy officer is pretty up there. And although he had led two former expeditions, they weren't particularly successful. In fact, in his first one, half of his crew had died. They ran out of food and they were reduced to eating boots. Despite his age and despite the fact he hadn't commanded a ship in some years, I imagine he wanted to redeem himself after his prior failures.
The expedition gets off to a good start, reaching Greenland by mid-July.
The letters that the sailors and officers send home are full of confident predictions about this being a huge success. In July 1845, a group of whaling vessels in Baffin Bay spot the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror heading west toward Lancaster Sound.
The Royal Navy had set a plan for Sir John Franklin and his crew to navigate through Lancaster Sound into the archipelago and find a calm area where they can be able to shelter down during the winter, because they're already anticipating that they're going to be trapped in sea ice for quite some time.
Once the ice melts that spring, they're supposed to continue on their voyage, maneuver through this archipelago of islands. They're supposed to send a message as soon as they get through, but no letter comes, no ships in the Pacific report ever having seen the Erebus and the Terror.
(1845) passes, 1846 passes, 1847 passes. Jane Franklin, Franklin's wife, is concerned.
So both her and the British Parliament, they are putting pressure on the British Admiralty to do something. From the British Admiralty's perspective, they don't want to say anything about there being a problem with this expedition. So they're really going to wait as long as they can. By 1848, there's enough pressure on the British Admiralty that they issue a reward of £20,000. By today's standards, that's $2 million.
Meanwhile, the first British search team is setting off to rescue them overland. Led by explorer John Ray, for the next 6 years, they scour the Arctic.
John Ray is a Scottish explorer. He got his start as a surgeon with the Hudson Bay Company.
Unlike Franklin and his men, Ray has learned from the local indigenous people, the Inuit. And so he's wearing fur instead of wool. He's using sleds and snowshoes. He's able to survive in that harsh Arctic environment just like the Inuit.
And he covers, by 1854, more than 5,000 square miles. In May of 1854, at a place about 150 miles east of King William's Island, they encounter a group of Inuit who want to trade with them.
And he noticed on the wrist of one of the Inuit hunters, his sealskin parka, a gold band. And Ray immediately recognizes it for what it is. It's a cap band. It's an officer's cap band. And he knows the chances of an Inuit being given that are very, very unlikely. So he starts a dialogue with this hunter and asks, where did you get that?
The Inuit tell Ray that 4 winters previously, they had encountered a group of about 40 white men dragging a boat south through this area. The Inuit described the leader of this group as a tall, stout man with a telescope. Their description matches a description of Francis Crozier, who had been Franklin's second in command.
The Inuit stated that the white men communicated using gestures, saying that their ships had actually been trapped in ice and they had fled to land in order to hunt deer.
Obviously, Ray is excited by this news, and he immediately wants to figure out where they've gone. The Inuit explain all of these men are now dead, and they believe that they know why.
The Inuit provide further information about this group of men as well. The Inuit say that they actually encountered their camp several months later and discovered 30 corpses on site.
They were quite sure that Franklin's men, or at least some group of them, had resorted to what Ray called the last resource, cannibalism. So the Inuit tell Ray that they had seen pots in which human flesh had been cooked, people with their arms or limbs cut off, severed, signs of the flesh being removed from the bones.
When the Inuit discovered this camp, not only do they have this shocking news, but they actually have physical artifacts to buttress their claim. There was a silver plate that actually belonged to Franklin.
So for Ray, both what the Inuit tell him and the artifacts that they've brought him, it's enough to convince him that he knows what happened to Franklin and his men.
But he writes a written report to his employers, the Hudson's Bay Company, detailing what he has found, and the report, as it turns out, gets to London before Ray does.
Ray is satisfied that he's finally solved the riddle of the missing expedition, but his report isn't well received.
Nobody wants to believe that men of the Royal Navy would resort to cannibalism. Cannibalism is something that savages engage in, not civilized men of the greatest empire in the world.
Charles Dickens gets involved in this because he's a friend of the Franklins, and Lady Franklin apparently urges him to attack Ray and the Inuit who make these claims.
Dickens implies that the Inuit actually killed Franklin's men. And then they took these artifacts, which was totally not true.
Ray collects the reward money, but his reputation is pretty well shot, and he does not make a return trip. It turns out, much, much later, he was right.